best local bands can be heard right here. 90.3 KRNU Lincoln.
Up the floor to Trey McGowan. He'll lob it for his... Goodness! A one-hand hammer!
On 90.3 KRNU, it's Huskers Hoops Live.
You betcha! Jazz Shelley has a triple-double!
Now, here's your host, Jacob Schwantz.
Welcome into Huskers Hoops Live. Very interesting week of Nebraska basketball. You want to look at the men's team. You want to look at the women's team. Very, very interesting week. Couple of nice wins, especially on the men's side of things. Couple of head-scratching losses. If you want to look at the women's basketball loss to Rutgers, I should say. But overall, a solid week of entertainment in the world of Nebraska ball. Welcome in. Hope you're doing all right. This is Jake Schranz with you on KRNU and on the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel. Live chat going on there. If you want to send in a message, if you want to ask questions or have a take you want me to try to react to, I will try to get to it on the show. But yeah, this is the 14th episode of Season 2, if you will. It should be a pretty good one. We're going to start off on the men's side of things, kind of looking back at an absolutely massive victory against the then number 6 Wisconsin Badgers as they marched into Lincoln. And then we'll get into the Sunday overtime matchup that we we all witnessed, and a lot of thoughts on that one. So we're going to break all that down. We'll get into the women's basketball games from this past week. Got a big win over Purdue, and then just a bad loss to Rutgers, their first conference win of the season. But then after that, we're going to look around the Big Ten, just kind of see where Nebraska's at. I like to do that every week just to kind of gauge what teams have been doing, where Nebraska still fits in the top of the conference, because it's getting very close. You look at the men's schedule, for example, only 8 more games left on the regular season schedule. And it's a little bit more than just a couple of weeks, because there are 2 weeks in the schedule where Nebraska only plays one game in between. So it'd be like a Saturday, and then the next Saturday they have another game. They don't have a midweek game. So 8 games will be stretched a little bit longer than you would think initially, but it is still only 8 games, and we are rapidly approaching March. We're rapidly approaching the most important time of the year in college basketball, and it's refreshing to finally see Nebraska in a position where this time of the year actually means something. And I want to talk about this before we kind of break down some of these games, because this is my 3rd year at UNL, and for the first 2 years, by the time February hit, most of the basketball felt unimportant or just insequential, because my freshman year, Bryce McGowens is here, Trey McGowens is here. It's CJ Wilcher's first season with Nebraska. Derek Walker is still putting together good production. But at this point in the year, they had barely any conference wins. They were not even 500. And so there was really no hope of March Madness bid, even NIT bid. So that season was kind of just a let's see what happens in every game, and maybe we pick up an upset. And we got a couple of them late in the season. I remember Alonzo Verge leading Nebraska into Wisconsin and picking up a huge win. But other than that, there just wasn't much to look forward to in that first season. And then last year, some drastic improvements with the additions of Sam Griesel, Bandamel, Jawan Gary, of course. And you get to 16-16, and there was some hope at the end of the season, kind of led by a late season push by Keisei Tominaga. There was some hope that postseason could be in play. I mean, if you make a run in the Big Ten tournament, you maybe get through into the NIT pretty comfortably, and you know, you never know what could happen in a tournament format. Maybe you go on a run in the Big Ten tournament and you get that automatic bid. Did not happen. Get ousted in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, and so again, no postseason in what was a much better season from my year one to then year two. Now you come into this year, and Nebraska is picking up massive wins, let alone the number one team in the country coming into Lincoln and taking them down. But the first game we'll talk about right now, Nebraska takes down number 6 Wisconsin in overtime, 80-72. Made an 18-point second half comeback to get to 16-6 on the season after this game. Now, I just laid it out for you that the significance of being good and being a team that March Madness is in play for at this point in the season. This isn't October. This isn't November where everyone has March in their future. This is early February. And Nebraska is still at that top upper echelon of the Big Ten. And most of the tough teams on the schedule have already played. They've played Wisconsin, beat them. They played Purdue, beat them. And this is the time in the season where Nebraska needs to put the foot down and continue to get the job done. Let's talk about this Wisconsin game. First thing to talk about, it's got to be Rink Mast for me. 20 points, 2 of 8 from 3-point range, but maybe no bigger shot from him in this Wisconsin game than the step back with a minute left in regulation. I mean, just a ridiculously clutch shot that Nebraska absolutely needed. And for Rink to do that, we saw him do it. I think it was the Ohio State game when he was on a different planet from downtown. I think he was 6 of 8 from 3 in that one. We saw him hit the step back prior to this Wisconsin game. He pulls it out once again. And it's one of the most electric shots that I've seen from a Nebraska basketball player since I've been here. There was Keisei Tominaga last year and this year. The transition pull-up threes, that is probably still the top tier electrifier out of a Nebraska offense in my time as a Nebraska fan. But Rink Mast hitting the step back threes is getting pretty close to that top upper echelon of exciting plays. But Rink Mast, that front court was going to be a huge matchup because Wisconsin has great front court players, consistent veteran players, Tyler Wall and Stephen Crowell, and Rink Mast needed to be up to the challenge, and fortunately for Nebraska, he was. He hit some big shots. Even in the overtime period, he had that hook at the end on a mismatch on the baseline. Very tough shot, and puts it right through the net, and that was kind of what eventually became the dagger in that game. And for Rink Mast to be able to come through and put a season together like this is something that I think most Nebraska fans have been surprised by, including me. There was hope that he could be at least as good as Derek Walker in the absence of what Derek Walker left Nebraska with when he moved on as he graduated out. But I think it's fair to say that Rink Mast, at least at times this year, has been better than Derek Walker. He's had multiple double-doubles. He's had 30-point games. He hits threes. He gets rebounds. He can hit out of the post. He still can pass. He's one of the better passers. I think he still leads the team in assists. So he does a lot of the same things that Derek Walker did, but he also has some nuance to his game that Derek Walker didn't bring to the table. And I saw a post on Instagram a couple days ago that was talking about the best transfers in the country. And players like Dalton Connect were on there at Tennessee, Hunter Dickinson at Kansas. But Rink Mast's name wasn't on that list. And I have to kind of question it, because if you look around college basketball, the Big Ten is one of the Power 5, Power 6 conference, if you want to include the Big East. And I think that Rink Mast has been arguably the most impactful transfer in the Big Ten, because of the way that he's been able to fill in for what Derek Walker meant to this team, but also add on top of that some of the skills that Derek Walker couldn't bring with the three-point shooting and some of the just overall jump shooting ability. And he's played big in a lot of these big games for Nebraska, notwithstanding Wisconsin. He was great in that one as well. So kind of strange to me that someone like Rink Mast, who came from Bradley, a much smaller program than Nebraska, and though Nebraska's history as of late hasn't been great, it's still a Big Ten program that competes on a nightly basis with the likes of historic programs like Michigan State and Michigan and Purdue and plenty others, Illinois, Indiana, what you name them. So just want to give that respect out there to Rink Mast because of what he's been able to do in his Husker career in this 1 year. Then we have the kind of back and forth one-on-one matchup, CJ Wilcher and Klesmit for Wisconsin. And this is a point in the game that was starting to concern me, because whenever you see those matchups kind of back and forth between two players, they're starting to chirp at each other after every made shot. That's a moment where players can get locked into their heads that I need to come back and show this guy that he's not better than me and that I can do anything he can but better. And that's exactly what CJ Wilcher and Klesmit for Wisconsin were doing right there. I was nearly as close as you could be to the game. I was like 5 rows up in the student section. And you could see after Klesmit would hit a shot, he would start looking at CJ, start whispering in his ear, just probably talking trash, just the generic trash you would talk after hitting a big shot. And then CJ would just come down and you would think, please don't ruin this comeback by going into it for yourself and trying to make a play for yourself that you shouldn't, but your ego just feels like you have to come back at a guy that went back at you. And luckily for Husker fans, CJ Wilcher was on that night. And by doing that and by going at Klesmit on the other end, it actually fired Nebraska up, because he was hitting such insane shots that most of the other guys weren't hitting for most of the game. Talk about making an 18-point comeback from the second half. They were down 19 at one point and ended up coming out with the win in overtime. So, yeah, those one-on-one matchups can feel dangerous at a time when your team is starting to build momentum. You don't want to ruin it by a guy just going out there taking heat checks. But if it's going to be a night like that for CJ Wilcher, where he goes for, I think, 24, I want to say, or it was definitely more than 20, that was one of the most fun sections to watch for me. But if you want to talk about the most impressive offensive performance in this one, you got to talk about A.J. Storr for Wisconsin. He is a problem for defenses. I mean, early in the game, when he came out, he looked like he was playing at a different level than everyone else. There was a point early in the first half where he alone had 14 points. The rest of Wisconsin had 13, and Nebraska as a team had just 15 points. So that's kind of where Wisconsin was pulling away in the first half, was A.J. Storr would just hit any shot he looked at, whether it was from three, he was pulling up from jumpers, he was getting to the rim, and regardless of who Nebraska put on him, they just had no answer. And it was starting to look concerning in that first half, because Wisconsin had so many different guys that they could go to to kind of just neutralize anything that Nebraska could bring to the table offensively. The first half was ugly, but we'll get into the second half in just a moment here on Huskers Hoops Live. We got to step aside for the first break of the morning. We want to come back. We'll wrap up the Wisconsin section and finish up with some more men's basketball here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
Do you want to make a difference for kids, for people in poverty, for the environment? Join AmeriCorps and get things done right here in Nebraska. With lots of different programs to choose from, you can serve in your area of passion and develop your skills while earning money to pay for college or to repay student loans. All programs are filling AmeriCorps positions to start September 1st. Learn more and apply at serve.nebraska.gov. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game, and I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else. Because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
Imagine what it would be like to live in a different country for a month, a couple months, or even a year. You may think,
I don't have money for that.
Or,
it won't fit into my 4-year college plan.
But the Education Abroad office at UNL wants you to know an education abroad is possible for anyone. There are over 400 scholarships to help fund your trip and an advising staff ready to assist with all the planning. So set up your advising session today. Go to educationabroad.unl.edu. The world is waiting for you.
Getting involved on campus, meeting new friends, and networking for the future can seem scary, but Scarlet Guard makes it easy for both graduate and undergraduates. Social events help students connect with others around campus, while the professional events help students network with alumni from around the globe. Possibilities within Scarlet Guard are endless, so join today. Go to huskeralum.org/Scarlet Guard or contact the Nebraska Alumni Association. Students today, alumni tomorrow, Huskers forever.
Exaggerating high school athletic achievements to your new college friends. Promising your new college friends that you'd a partial football scholarship to no-name state in Montana. What are these, you ask? These are the symptoms of someone with high school peaker syndrome, or HSPS. HSPS is a serious mental health condition that affects college students post-high school athletics. Thankfully, there is a cure to this crippling disease known as the UNL men's rugby team. UNL men's rugby team offers students the opportunity to relive those glory days. Tackle your HSPS head-on by visiting the rugby team's website at unlrugby.com.
For a little extra help settling in at college, look to UNL's first-year experience and transition programs. You can receive one-on-one student coaching and tutoring to get you through that tough course, or you can attend free workshops for information on stress, money, even jobs and internships. First-year experience and transition programs will assist you with academic support or general life skills to make your experience at UNL successful. Stop by First-Year Experience and Transition Programs located at 127 Love Library South.
Schrott's back with you here on Huskers Hoops Live as we continue to break down Wisconsin and Nebraska. Was just talking about AJ Storr in this game. I don't know if there was anybody that impressed me more than AJ Storr. He went off in the beginning portion of this game, finished the day with 28 points on 22 shots. Kind of went cold just a little bit in the second half, but that first half was insane. He hit 5 threes, and I think Khalil Ware is the best NBA draft prospect in the Big Ten so far this season. But just on this game and this flash of potential from AJ Storr of what he could be as a scorer and the shots that he was able to take and make, he looked like a terrific NBA draft prospect. And he's had a couple of these big performances. Most of the season, though, some of his bigger games were not put together and matched up with Wisconsin's biggest games on the schedule. He's had a couple of stinkers during some of Wisconsin's most important matchups, but he did not have a stinker in this one. Led the team in scoring by 15 points by the next closest, Max Klesmet, who had 13 points, matched by Chucky Hepburn. But yeah, AJ Storr almost was enough to put Nebraska down, but in the end, wasn't enough. Sam Hoiberg, 22 minutes, only took 2 shots, but he was out there in the clutch moments. Nebraska needed him, came through with some big plays. He's been out there most of the season in the big moments late in the game instead of Jamarcus Lawrence. That's the closing rotation. Sam Hoiberg, he's been trustworthy with the ball, and he comes away. He makes more good plays than he does head-scratching bad plays. So it's hard to argue with him being out there on the court when Nebraska needs something good to go their way. But something else that a lot of people don't talk about from this game, Nebraska got a great whistle. I know there were some fans who were upset in overtime by a lot of these calls against Nebraska, and I think the officials unofficially had to get some more fouls on Nebraska to make the disparity not look as drastic, because you look at the final numbers, Nebraska had 13 fouls called against them and 18 fouls called against Wisconsin. I think there were like 4 fouls called against Nebraska in the early portion of overtime. So you could see the totals have been quite different. And all you have to do is look at the free throw battle. Nebraska won it 26-12 in terms of attempts. Overtime, Nebraska saw some free throws late because they were starting to get a little bit more in the driver's seat, and Wisconsin really couldn't do anything to finish out. And just remember this home whistle that Nebraska got when we start talking about Illinois here in a second, because it was quite a drastic difference to deal with for Nebraska fans. But last couple of things, Keisei Tominaga, kind of an unfortunate performance. It was his birthday. He couldn't get really anything going, didn't play much down the stretch. He was just 1 of 7 from the field, 2 points. One of Keisei's worst games since probably early last year. Just not his day, and luckily it didn't end up costing Nebraska a huge win. So Keisei gets a pass. He gets one because of how elite he's been in many other games, including the one I'll be talking about in a second. Bryce Williams, very confusing game for me because first half he looked really strange. He wasn't himself to me. His closeouts were a little late. He had some strange fouls, strange mishaps. But then second half, he I don't know what happened, and maybe nothing, but just based on my view of what Bryce Williams is as a player and the things that he does really well, he seemed like a different player in the second half than in the first. He was a little bit more efficient, a little bit more aggressive on both ends, and I think he started to make some great plays, and he was key for Nebraska to pick this win up. 4 of 9 shooting, 17 points on 9 attempts because of the way he was able to get to the free throw line. 7 of 8 from the free throw line, very effective. Ended up hitting the 2 free throws that Nebraska needed in the clutch. I can't say enough about it, but that's enough about Wisconsin. Let's move on to Illinois, because this, ladies and gentlemen, was quite the game. Nebraska goes to their second straight overtime game, but ends up losing this one by 3 points. They pushed number 14, I want to say. Yeah, number 14, Illinois, 87-84. Officiating. That is the hot topic about this game. A couple of examples. Illinois got 11 free throws in overtime, 30 total attempts in this game. They made 20 of them. Nebraska gets 14 free throw attempts in the entire game. Illinois, just look at those numbers. I know Nebraska was fouling in overtime to try to make a comeback. But look at the drastic difference. 11 free throws for Illinois in overtime, just a 5-minute overtime. Nebraska gets 14 all game long. 45 minutes, 14 free throw attempts. Made all 14 of them, so that's great. That'll keep you in a game. But when your opponent is getting 16 more attempts than you are, it's almost impossible to win that game. Rink Mast, he gets stripped, and I put stripped in air quotes, on the last possession of overtime. There was clear contact on the arm. That was a missed call. Should have been a foul. Rink Mast to the line, and it wouldn't have tied the game because Nebraska was down by 3, but it would have stopped the clock, would have gave Nebraska a chance to cut it back into a 1-point game, and not to be. There was even a time in late regulation where one of Illinois' bigs, his pivot foot changed about 6 times underneath the basket, and no traveling call, no nothing. Nebraska should have got a turnover there, would have been huge because of how close this game was. And again, no whistle. Illinois takes advantage. But it's not all about the officiating, right? Illinois out-rebounds Nebraska 50-33. And you look at those numbers, it's almost insane that Nebraska was even this close in a game where their opponent was absolutely outshining them on the glass, a different physical level that Illinois brought to the table in this one, while getting such a home whistle like no other. I mean, it's insane. 87-84 in overtime, and you're getting outdone in 2 directions like that. It's kind of crazy. You look at the leading scorer in this one for Illinois, Coleman Hawkins, 20 points and 4 threes. He's a veteran in this league. He can go out there on any given night and make threes, make jumpers. He's a big that is comfortable out there, and he's hard for pretty much any team in the country to stop because not a lot of teams have a guy that can go out there and match what Coleman Hawkins does. That's why he was looking at the NBA potentially last offseason before coming back to Illinois for one more year. But you look at Keisei Tominaga on the other end for Nebraska, 31 points on just 14 attempts from the field, went 5 of 7 from 3-point range. And it was good to see this because, again, in the overtime win against Wisconsin, he was kind of a non-factor. Had just 2 points on his birthday. Was a moment that you would like to see Keisei Tominaga lead his team to, a huge win with some big shots, kind of like what we saw against Northwestern, where he came through in the clutch and hit the dagger 3. That's kind of what it felt like was coming up in this Illinois game. It felt like the game that Keisei Tominaga was going to take into his own hands and finish up and get Nebraska their first win in conference play on the road. But that didn't end up happening. Ends up being an 87-84 overtime loss. CJ Wilcher, big-time factor as well. 1 of 6 from the field in this Illinois game. And it's such a drastic difference from what we saw in the Wisconsin game. Wilcher kind of injected life into Nebraska when it seemed like there was nothing left in that Wisconsin game in the, 18-point comeback. A lot of that came from CJ Wilcher. And unfortunately, in such a close game on the road, you lose in overtime. CJ Wilcher going 1 of 6. If he goes his usual 2 or 3 of 5 from downtown instead of, let's see what he finished with here. CJ Wilcher 0 of 3 from downtown. He's been a 50% guy since 2024 pretty much. He was 1 of 6 from the field. If he goes 3 of 6 with 2 threes off the bench, Nebraska might be sitting right now as a top 25 team in the country after beating 2 top 15 teams in the same week. But it's just not the case. And it's really unfortunate, but it's also kind of strange, and I might look at it here after this break, but even after losing to Illinois, Nebraska still ended up getting a lot of positive results and a lot of important metrics, like the net ranking they moved up. I think in the KenPom they moved up as well. So I'm going to take a look at that a little bit later on in the show. Just see some of the teams that Nebraska's hovering around in the most updated net ranking that I could find here on their service. But I'm going to step aside here on Huskers Hoops Live. And I come back, we'll take a look at some of these women's basketball games in Nebraska and just kind of gauge what I think about this late season performance from Nebraska, because there's some tough games coming up right here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Imagine never being able to drive, to watch TV, or even read Harry Potter. Reading is essential to our lives. City Impact Reading Center helps Lincoln Public Elementary Schools boost their students' reading scores by getting all students at or above their grade's reading level. Each week, volunteers of all ages go sit and read with students. You can help a student gain an important life skill and help change their future. If you're looking for some rewarding volunteer experiences, please visit their website at cityimpact.org.
For a little extra help settling in at college, look to UNL's first-year experience and transition programs. You can receive one-on-one student coaching and tutoring to get you through that tough course, or you can attend free workshops for information on stress, money, even jobs and internships. First-year experience and transition programs will assist you with academic support or general life skills to make your experience at UNL successful. Stop by First-Year Experience and Transition Programs located at 127 Love Library South.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game? And I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else, because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
Do you want to make a difference for kids, for people in poverty, for the environment? Join AmeriCorps and get things done right here in Nebraska. With lots of different programs to choose from, you can serve in your area of passion and develop your skills while earning money to pay for college or to repay student loans. All programs are filling AmeriCorps positions to start September 1st. Learn more and apply at serve.nebraska.gov. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Getting involved on campus, meeting new friends, and networking for the future can seem scary, but Scarlet Guard makes it easy for both graduate and undergraduates. Social events help students connect with others around campus, while the professional events help students network with alumni from around the globe. Possibilities within Scarlet Guard are endless, so join today. Go to huskeralum.org/Scarlet Guard or contact the Nebraska Alumni Association. Students today, alumni tomorrow, Huskers forever.
Jake Schrantz back with you on Huskers Hoops Live. Let's get into some women's basketball now. Nebraska took a nice win to start the week against Purdue, and they end up getting 5 double-figure scores, a pretty decisive one over the Boilermakers, 68-54. First thing I noticed thinking back on this game, Callan Hake in the starting lineup, in there for essentially replacement for Maddie Kroll. And I actually like this move, just kind of based on what both players have been doing recently in this season. Callan Hake, she's had some huge moments off the bench, kind of coming in for 5 or 6 minute spurts in important sections of games and coming through and hitting huge shots. Whereas Maddie Kroll just been a little bit off at this point in the year. Just had a couple scoreless games in important ones. She's been quiet in a lot of the, games that Nebraska should win, but she's not really establishing herself as one of the older players on what for Nebraska is a somewhat young roster. When you look at the whole up and down of who plays in the rotation, you've got essentially 4 freshmen doing a lot of the work. So good to see that Callan Hake is stepping up in this way. And she came through and didn't do as much in this first game against Purdue. I want to get the official numbers right now. I think she had just 4 points in this win. It was still a 14-point win for Nebraska, mostly led by the top 3. But yeah, Callan Hake with 4 points and 4 shots in the starting lineup. Played only 18 minutes, so the least of any of the starting 5. But she did come through, and on a night like that where Jazz Shelley and Natalie Potts and Alexis Markowski are doing work, and then you've also got Darian White, who I've been very impressed by as of late. She's been a little bit more aggressive on the offensive end, I would say. She came through with 14 points, tied for a team lead with Alexis Markowski. And I feel like when Darian White is operating with this mindset, it makes Nebraska a little bit more dangerous. She goes 4 of 7 from the field. She got to the free throw line 8 times. And she just has been a very solid transfer piece for Coach Williams. Really like what she's been doing. Kendall Moriarty off the bench, 11 points in 15 minutes or so, just under 16, really. Pretty good day from her. She's had a couple of these games in Lincoln. We think back to when Nebraska played Michigan just under a month ago, and Kendall Moriarty had one of her best games of the season as a Husker. And with Michigan on the horizon tonight, it could be a day where Nebraska needs Kendall Moriarty to come through again, because they're for sure going to need her defense on the perimeter against some of their top talent. We'll get into it in a little bit on the show. But if she can bring the offense like she did when Michigan was in town a couple of weeks ago, that could definitely be what Nebraska needs to put them over the edge on the road against a Michigan team that's definitely better inside their home arena. But yeah, the usual suspects for Nebraska. You've got Markowski, Potts, Shelley, all in double figures, 5 of them in total for Nebraska. But Shelley, Markowski, and Potts, they combined for a lot of Nebraska's scoring in this one. I think it was around 39, if my math is correct, maybe 35. So just insane to be able to come through as a top 3 and put up that much production, because in a night where you score 38 points, to put up half your team scoring by 3 people, it's going to be a little bit concerning sometimes, because on a night like that where it works out and you have a comfortable lead pretty much the rest of the way down the stretch, it could be a good thing. You're thinking, hey, our top 3 is better than the opposing teams, and we can rely on this. We can rely on 3 players carrying us down the stretch. Or it turns out like it did in the next game against Rutgers, where sometimes when you rely on players a little bit too much, it can cost you in a big way, because Nebraska lost to the Scarlet Knights for the 2nd year in a row. But this one, I think, is quite a bit worse. It's the worst loss of the season to date, 71-70. Rutgers was winless in the conference. And, let's talk about it. Shelley and Markowski, they combined for just 7 of 27 from the field in this game. And remember, I just said a moment ago, in a game like against Purdue, where Shelley and Markowski and Natalie Potts, they're hitting the mark. They're getting to their, season average or even better. That's when, fans will be happy. But when you have a cold shooting night like this against Rutgers, it's a lot more apparent when your team relies just a little bit too much on a couple of players to to be firing on all cylinders on a nightly basis. Rutgers, I mean, in Nebraska's defense, they did shoot a lot better than they usually do. They were 7 of 15 from three-point range. Nebraska, 7 of 22 in three-point shooting against Purdue, 7 of 26 from three-point shooting against Rutgers. Just not a great weekend from beyond the arc, clearly, just based on those numbers for the Huskers. Kind of a reason that these two teams gave them such fits, because last week on the show when we were breaking down the kind of like preview of this upcoming stretch against Purdue and Rutgers, we were thinking 2 home games in a row against Purdue, who was bottom 5 in the Big Ten, and Rutgers, who was last in the Big Ten. So this was a week that Nebraska needed to collect 2 wins in convincing fashion to push the postseason narrative forward, because they have got a really tough 3-game stretch coming up. 2 games on the road against Michigan and Ohio State. And in between that, sandwiched in between that, is arguably the biggest game of the season, the home one against Iowa this weekend. And I talked about how Rutgers could be a trap game because Michigan was coming up just a couple days after. You know, you don't want to put your mind too much on the upcoming week with 2 huge games on your schedule that could essentially push your postseason into a guarantee. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's what the case was with this performance for Nebraska. They just looked essentially awful in this Rutgers game. But yeah, that is not ideal to go into this tough of a stretch late in the season and not have the 2-game momentum like you would like to, playing against some of the lowest ranked teams in the Big Ten. Rutgers now, after this win, they are just 1-10 in Big Ten play. That was their first conference win of the season. They have a 7-17 record now. Just, it doesn't look right seeing this Nebraska women's basketball team lose to the 2024 Rutgers Scarlet Knights, because I think this Husker team is actually very talented, and the way that they've played in some of the bigger games this season, it wasn't what we saw in this Rutgers game. So that's very disappointing to me. And you have to think, what could this loss end up meaning for Nebraska? Is it going to carry a lot of momentum into the next few games, and maybe Nebraska goes 0-3 in this tough stretch, and all of a sudden they're looking at a 4-game losing streak at the most important time of the year? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe this win ends up lighting a fire under them, and they say, how could we lose to the lowest ranked team in the Big Ten? We need to go out and show that this is not who we are, and we are actually one of the top teams in the Big Ten, as we've been pretty much all season. They've been in the top 5 most of the year in the Big Ten Conference standings. So maybe they go after this Rutgers game, they lose by 1, and they think, you know, Michigan, we already took care of you a couple weeks ago. We'll take care of you in your own arena. Hey, Iowa, you gave us some major problems in Iowa City. We're going to give you some major problems in Lincoln, and maybe just pull off one of the biggest upsets in program history. And then you go against Ohio State the next game on the road and say, hey, J.C. Sheldon, hey, Cody McMahon, I know you could beat Iowa, so can we, after you pick up a 2-gamer in this weekend. Maybe they go on a 3-game winning streak against some of the best that the Big Ten has to offer. You never really know what a loss like this could do for a team, but you have to kind of hope for the best, because at this point in the year, when you lose to a team like Rutgers and your resume is not insanely strong, it's a decent resume for Nebraska, but I don't think they have any, or they don't have too many huge wins on the schedule in terms of ranked matchups. They've got non-conference losses. You got Creighton, TCU gave them some trouble. Nice, decent wins early on in the non-con against Florida Atlantic and Georgia Tech. Big win against Michigan State, who I don't know if you guys saw, but they took down Minnesota in pretty convincing fashion last night. But they've got wins against Maryland, They've got a win against Illinois, win against Michigan, and, nothing insane so far. So a chance this coming weekend to really pull something off that hasn't been done all year, with some chances at a ranked win, and we'll see if they can do it. But we're going to step aside here one more time on Huskers Hoops Live. To come back, we'll look around the Big Ten, see where both these teams are sitting, because it's getting close to that time of the year where selection committees will be looking around. And I want to look around as well and just see how Nebraska is doing, what they need to do to further secure themselves into the postseason here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
If you're experiencing anxiety, depression, grief, or are even just homesick, try talking to a friendly professional at CAPS, your university's counseling and psychological service. They offer individual and group services to any registered student at UNL. International students, that means you too. Just call your University Health Center on City Campus anytime Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The services are easy and confidential, and the best part is the first 3 sessions are free. Go online at health.unl.edu/CAPS.
Some students cannot afford to wash clothing or bedding. Some also have trouble paying for food over the course of a semester. UNL offers a pantry service to help these students in need. The pantry, also called Open Shelf, offers hygiene products, laundry detergent, and non-perishable foods. Open Shelf is open to all UNL students, and use of this service will remain confidential. Open Shelf is housed on the 2nd floor of the Lutheran Center. It is open 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Mondays and 2 to 5 p.m. Fridays. For more information on Open Shelf, visit openshelf.unl.edu.
Loving Nebraska has never been easier. Spread your Husker pride with more than a flag waving in the yard on a fall Saturday. Join the Nebraska Alumni Association and spread that Husker power. Membership costs less than $1 a week, and recent graduates get a discount. So if you are ready to continue your support and remain a part of the Sea of Red, visit HuskerAlum.org to learn more and to continue cheering on your Nebraska Cornhuskers. Again, that's HuskerAlum.org.
For a little extra help settling in at college, look to UNL's first-year experience and transition programs. You can receive one-on-one student coaching and tutoring to get you through that tough course, or you can attend free workshops for information on stress, money, even jobs and internships. First-year experience and transition programs will assist you with academic support or general life skills to make your experience at UNL successful. Stop by First-Year Experience and Transition Programs located at 127 Love Library South.
If you're experiencing anxiety, depression, grief, or are even just homesick, try talking to a friendly professional at CAPS, your university's counseling and psychological service. They offer individual and group services to any registered student at UNL. International students, that means you too. Just call your University Health Center on City Campus anytime Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The services are easy and confidential, and the best part is the first 3 sessions are free. Go online at health.unl.edu/CAPS.
Jake Schrantz back with you on Huskers Hoops Live. 14th episode of this 2024 season. Glad to be with you breaking down this Nebraska basketball week, but let's take a look now around the Big Ten, just see where Nebraska kind of fits late in this regular season as we are into February already. It's kind of crazy to say, but we have got men's basketball standings coming up. Purdue still at that top spot. They picked up a huge win this weekend against Wisconsin. They're now 10-2 in the conference and 21-2 overall. And, they are stuck up at that top spot because Illinois is right behind them at 8-3. And they've got a little ways to go in order to catch up to Purdue. Wisconsin right behind them. And then you've got Northwestern and Michigan State quietly advancing to 14-8 overall on the season. And Michigan State is one of the teams that had a really rough start because of how tough their non-conference schedule was. They had an early loss on the season to Nebraska and Lincoln. That was a time where Husker fans were saying, hey, we just beat Michigan State. We might be a team to reckon with in this actual full season of play. And that actually ended up being the case. And that's a win that at this point in the year on the resume, starting to look a lot better than it did in the late couple of months in the college basketball season, still in 2023, like November or December, when Michigan State was struggling to get out of the block. But at this point, they're 6-5 in the conference, 14-8 overall. One of those 5 losses in the Big Ten was to Nebraska, who is right behind Michigan State at 6-6. They are currently in the 6th spot in the Big Ten standings. And that's a really interesting spot to be in, especially this year, because it's last year. I want to say last year there was 12 of the 14 Big Ten schools made it to either March Madness or the NIT. And Nebraska and Minnesota were the only 2 that didn't make it to one of those. And Nebraska finished at 16-16. The Huskers already have 16 wins on the season right now. They're 16-7. So unless they lose their next 8 straight games and the first round of the Big Ten tournament, they will improve on last year's record. I think they're going to get to 20-plus wins. I really do. Even with the 0-6 conference record, which is tied for the worst with Ohio State, the only other Big Ten team with 0 road conference wins, unless that becomes even more of an issue than it already is, and somehow Nebraska falls off in their home arena, which is almost impossible because they have the best conference home record, one of the best overall home records in the entire country at 14-1 this season. I feel like this Husker team has what it takes to make March Madness, but this is such a strange year as well because most of the projections are saying, hey, only 6, maybe 7 Big Ten teams are going to make March Madness. And of course, the year that Nebraska is a good team is the same year that as a 5 or a 6 seed in the Big Ten, you're still fighting for your spot. You're somewhat on the bubble for March Madness, even as a top 6 team in one of the most competitive Big Ten conference, not the most competitive Big Ten conferences, but one of the most competitive conferences in college basketball, I should say. And to go from last year where almost double what's projected to make March Madness from this year made it last year, it's really unfortunate that this good of a season is placed in a year like this where teams like Iowa and Maryland and Penn State are not getting the same respect that they usually do, especially at the bottom 2 in the conference with Ohio State and Michigan, 2 perennial March Madness teams that are more likely than not going to make it this year. So, there's the Big Ten men's standings. Let's look at the women's basketball standings currently. Iowa and Ohio State, both at 10-1 in the conference. Very close race at the top of the Big Ten. And this is a very interesting stretch as well for Nebraska because Iowa and Ohio State, those are 2 of the 3 next teams that Nebraska plays. And Iowa's at home, Ohio State's on the road. There's a chance that Nebraska could do something pretty funny and hand both those teams just their 3rd and 4th loss respectively on the season. And all of a sudden, if Nebraska's able to do that, you're looking at an 8-5, potentially 9-5 conference record if they can beat Michigan tonight, which is one of the most important games of the season at this point because Michigan currently sits at the 6th spot in the Big Ten standings, tied with Nebraska at 6-5. So if Nebraska can beat Michigan, 2nd time of the season that would be, they could advance past Michigan in the standings, get back near that top 5 as they would advance to 6th. And then anything goes after that. You've got Iowa and Ohio State, some of the toughest teams to play against in this upcoming stretch. But there's the standings. Nebraska at 7th in the women's basketball standings. Husker men's basketball in 6th in the men's basketball standings. But I said earlier I want to look around at the net rankings for Coach Hoiberg's squad because we talked about how Nebraska took a little bit of a step forward even after losing to Illinois. They're currently in the net rankings, the 5th school in the Big Ten. They are 57th in the net in the entire country. And some of the schools they are around right now, Virginia Tech and Princeton. You see Texas A&M and Butler within 5 of Nebraska. But there's a lot of mid-major schools. It's also funny to see Bradley at 55, or not at 55, yeah. So Nebraska and Bradley very close together in the net ranking. And to see, I see how this works. So Nebraska's at 52, Bradley is at 55, and to be just 3 apart when Nebraska took one of Bradley's best players from last year and Rick Mast is kind of funny to see. I see a couple Big Ten schools at 58 and 60, Northwestern and Iowa, trying to fight Nebraska off to get near that top 50 spot in the net ranking. If you don't know, the net ranking is one of the important factors, very indicative of postseason standings and kind of where teams fit into March Madness seeding. Some of the highest rankings in the Big Ten currently, you've got Purdue at the number 2 rank in the net ranking. Wisconsin's at 13. Illinois is at 14. And then you've got Michigan State at 22. That has really been such an impressive come up at this point in the season. Michigan State was a team early on in the couple of months in 2023 when the season was starting that people were really concerned about. They were losing games that they usually don't. They lost, who was it there? They had that early season loss. It's eluding me right now. Got to look that up real quick. I apologize. But they had the early season loss to Arizona. I think it was Arizona. They lost to Duke, I want to say. Yeah, they lost to Wisconsin 70-57 in early December. And it was James Madison. Where's James Madison at in the net ranking? Got to see that. They're at 63, so they're still holding on. They're a little bit behind Nebraska currently. But James Madison, they started the year at an insane rate. They're 20-3 out of the Sun Belt, and they're maybe going to make the March Madness tournament as a conference champion. Don't sleep on James Madison. They took a game against Michigan State earlier this year, so really impressive that Coach Izzo has been able to turn the season around there. But upcoming matchups as we wrap up here on Huskers Hoops Live. Coach Hoiberg is leading Nebraska into Evanston against Northwestern on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. And then they've got Michigan at home this weekend. Northwestern 15-7. They are on a 2-game losing streak. They're 2-2 since losing to Nebraska a couple of weeks ago. They beat Illinois 96-91 in overtime at home, and then followed that up with an Ohio State victory. Then they lost to Purdue and Minnesota to get to that 2-2 record since losing to Nebraska. But a little bit of a strange thing. 3 of their last 4 games since losing to Nebraska have been overtime games. And you look at Nebraska playing 2 overtime games back-to-back. These are going to be some pretty tired legs going at each other tomorrow night. But the Huskers host Michigan this weekend. They're 7-15. I believe last in the Big Ten Conference. Currently on a 5-game losing streak. They play Wisconsin tomorrow. You would expect that to advance to a 6-game losing streak before coming to Lincoln. Their last win came against their rival Ohio State on January 15th. And that should be a game that Nebraska, even if they lose on the road to Northwestern, this should be a tune-up game. Can't afford a women's basketball-esque loss to Rutgers like we just saw this past week, where you lose to the worst team in the conference at this point in the season. You got to continue to improve this resume and build up a record, but doesn't get any easier on the women's side of things. They've got Michigan tonight. Big game. If you want to tune into that one, we'll be breaking it down next week. Hopefully that's a win, and Nebraska's looking at a season sweep of the Wolverines. And then Iowa time. The Hawkeyes come into Lincoln. Caitlin Clark's going to be here. It's a sold-out game in PBA. It is going to be electric. The last time these teams played, Caitlin Clark had almost 40 points. A lot of fun games to break down in the upcoming week. I'll be back on the air on Tuesday morning next week, as always, 8 to 9 a.m. Thanks for joining me on Huskers Hoops Live. And with that being said, go Big Red.
Indie, alternative, and local music, 90.